Welcome, Fright Night Vault listeners. If you're listening to this, you've probably been on one of those trips. A winter getaway, laughter echoing through a rented cabin, the firelight warm against frost-covered windows. But this time, the cold outside isn't what you should fear, because tonight's story reminds us that sometimes when the mountain goes silent, something in the woods starts to listen. If you haven't already, subscribe to the vault and never walk alone again. The road to Black Ridge Peak twisted through walls of snow and pine, winding higher than the phone signal could reach. The six of them, a family of four and two close friends, had been looking forward to this trip for months, a chance to unplug, to ski, to breathe mountain air. By day, it was perfect. The cabin stood alone at the edge of a frozen clearing, its chimney coughing gentle smoke into the pale sky. The snow sparkled like powdered glass. Inside, the fire crackled, the smell of pine and cocoa filled the air, and for the first time in years, everything felt peaceful. They spent the afternoon skiing down the slopes, laughing, throwing snow, chasing that feeling of simple, happy exhaustion. By sunset, they'd returned to the cabin, cheeks red, gloves thawing by the hearth, music playing low on someone's phone. Then the wind changed. It started as a hollow whistle through the trees, then deepened into something else, a low, drawn-out tone that rose and fell, almost rhythmic, like breathing. They thought it was just the wind funneling through the valley, until Sam, the oldest of the two friends, froze by the window. His hand trembled slightly as he pointed into the dark woods beyond the clearing. Did you see that?" he asked. They all crowded near the glass. Outside, between the trees, something moved. It wasn't clear at first, just a darker shape against the night. Then it tilted, unnaturally tall, like a shadow with weight. The father laughed it off. "Probably a tree. Your eyes are just adjusting." But Sam didn't answer. His reflection in the window was pale, his breath fogging the glass. For a moment, the figure seemed to sway, and then, impossibly, it stepped sideways, out of sight. The family went back to the fire, uneasy laughter covering the silence that followed. But the mother, Julia, couldn't shake the feeling that something out there had been watching. Later that night, as everyone slept, she got up to refill the wood stove. The air inside the cabin was heavy, the wind moaning against the walls. She turned toward the window and froze. There, just beyond the porch light, stood a tall, narrow shape. It wasn't moving, it was waiting, and when the light flickered, she saw its face, pale and stretched, mouth open too wide, black eyes glinting with reflected firelight. She dropped the log and stumbled backward. When she looked again, it was gone. Outside, the snow held no footprints. Morning came to Black Ridge Peak like a false comfort. Sunlight spilling weakly over snow that hid every trace of what Julia thought she'd seen. The family laughed about it over breakfast, calling it the mountain ghost. Sam forced a smile but kept glancing at the window. He hadn't slept. He said he'd heard footsteps on the porch sometime after midnight, slow, deliberate, and heavy enough to make the boards creak. They went skiing again, trying to shake the unease, but the woods around the slopes felt wrong now. The trees stood too still. The sound of the wind seemed to echo, as if something was copying it. By afternoon, gray clouds rolled in, cutting off the light. They decided to head back before the storm hit. Halfway to the cabin, they noticed the snow. It wasn't falling, it was drifting upward. Sam stopped walking. "Do you see that?" The flakes lifted from the ground in little spirals, like something beneath the snow was breathing. The father hurried everyone along, laughing too loudly, voice shaking just enough to betray the fear beneath it. When they reached the cabin, the door was open, just slightly. A soft gap, as if someone had gone inside quietly and didn't close it all the way. "Maybe the wind," he said. But there was no wind. The air was still, unnaturally so. Inside, nothing was out of place, except for the smell. It was faint at first, like wet bark and rot, then stronger, filling their throats with a sweet, decaying scent. The fire had burned out completely, though the ashes were warm. On the kitchen counter, Julia noticed something. A handprint, long, thin, pressed deep into the layer of frost that had formed overnight. They packed their things. The father said they'd leave before dark, drive down to the lodge, finish the weekend somewhere else. The road wasn't far, but as they started loading the car, the forest behind them went quiet again. No birds, no wind, just the crunch of snow under boots. Not theirs. Something was moving behind the trees. Not walking, stalking. The mother grabbed her son, pulling him close. The father raised his flashlight, sweeping it across the dark line of pines. For a second, it caught something. Two pale shapes glinting between the trunks, too far apart to be eyes on a human face. Then they blinked. He whispered, "Get inside." Now. The sound that followed didn't belong to any animal. A low, rattling groan that rolled through the snow like a voice trying to speak through a broken throat. And from the woods, something answered. Another groan, then another. There wasn't one shape anymore. There were many. The sun fell fast that evening, swallowed by the storm. The snow came heavy now, not drifting, but falling with purpose, smothering every path down the mountain. The family and their two friends barricaded the doors, dragged furniture against the windows, and turned off every light. Outside, something moved, footsteps in the snow, first distant, then circling the cabin. Slow, testing, counting. They huddled together near the fire pit, whispering. The air was thick with that smell again. Decay sweetened by the cold, like wet leaves and something far older. Sam peeked through the curtain. The flashlight beam caught only the tree line, a sea of shifting gray. He moved the light lower and froze. They were standing there. At least a dozen shapes pale against the storm, their bodies rigid and wrong, heads tilted, arms hanging loosely at their sides, not moving, not breathing. Then one stepped forward. The beam caught its face, or what was left of it. Skin sloughed away, black veins crawling up from the neck. Its mouth hung open as if frozen mid-scream, teeth cracked and bloody. Yet its eyes were open and alive. The sound that came from it was a shudder, a groaning breath that fogged the air. Then, in unison, the others began to move. Slow at first, then faster, dragging themselves across the snow with sickening jerks. The father shouted for everyone to stay away from the windows, but the boards began to creak, the front porch groaning under their weight. The door shook once, then again. A hand punched through the glass beside the frame, gray, frozen, veins lit with a faint blue glow. Fingers clawed inside, twisting. Julia screamed. The father swung the fire poker, slamming it down on the hand until the wrist snapped. The severed piece hit the floor, still twitching. They ran for the back of the cabin, but the walls were shuddering now. Something slammed against the side, again and again, with bone-cracking force. The little boy, crying, whispered, "They found us." And outside, through the howling wind, came voices, human voices, faint and broken. "Let us in. We're freezing. It's cold out here." But when Julia looked again through the window, the faces pressed against the glass were smiling, too wide, too sharp. Sam yelled that they could make it to the shed. It was only a few feet from the porch. He grabbed the flashlight, threw open the back door, and ran into the storm. The beam cut through the snow for only a second before it vanished. A scream followed, high, wet, and short, then silence. The others backed away from the window, hearts pounding, until they saw the flashlight again. It was lying in the snow, pointed back toward the cabin, still on. And just before it went out, something stepped over it. The power died just after midnight. The last thing they heard before the lights went out was the wood splitting near the window. Then, silence. The darkness inside the cabin was complete. Every breath sounded too loud, every heartbeat too close. The father held the poker tight, whispering for everyone to stay still. They could hear the snow creaking on the porch, soft thuds, then scraping, as if something heavy dragged itself along the steps. Then came the knock. 3 slow, hollow thuds. No one moved. Another knock, louder this time, then the sound of the doorknob turning. It stopped. The floorboards settled. For a moment, they thought it was over. Then the boy whispered, "Mom." She turned and saw what he was looking at. Through the back window, pressed against the frost, was a face, pale, frozen, eyes clouded like ice. It smiled, not because it recognized them, but because it had found them. The father lunged forward, grabbed the curtain, and yanked it shut. But when he turned back, something was already inside. A tall, gray figure stood near the doorframe, dripping snow onto the floor. Its chest heaved slowly, each breath a wet, crackling sound. In its hand hung a piece of torn fabric, Sam's jacket. It raised its head, its mouth opened, and for the first time, it spoke. "So warm in here." The mother screamed. The thing moved faster than any frozen corpse should, jerking forward, hands clawing through the dark. The family bolted toward the hallway, but the noise drew more of them. Shadows pouring through broken glass. The sound of flesh against wood, bones grinding. They ran into the basement, slamming the door. The father braced it with a shelf, panting, whispering prayers that went unanswered. Upstairs, footsteps shuffled overhead, then stopped. The boy cried quietly in his mother's arms, whispering that he could hear them breathing through the cracks in the floor. The sound was wet, uneven, close, and then a voice whispered back, "Shh, we know." The door creaked once more, then silence. When rescuers found the cabin days later, they reported no signs of struggle, no broken doors, no footprints, no blood. Just a fireplace still faintly warm, and a half-finished cup of cocoa sitting by the window. The family's car was gone, but in the snow-covered woods nearby, rangers found something strange. 6 sets of footprints leading away from the cabin, barefoot, dragging slightly, heading deeper into the forest where the fog never lifts. And at night, when the storm rolls down from Black Ridge Peak, the search teams still swear they hear laughter in the wind, and something else whispering through the trees. So warm in here. If you ever find yourself alone in a cabin and the storm outside begins to sound like breathing, don't look out the window, because what's waiting in the snow might be closer than you think. Listen in the dark. Keep your lights low. Don't open the door when the wind knocks. Subscribe to the Vault and never walk alone again. If you have a story of your own, please feel free to add it in the comments. You never know. The next story could be yours. See you on the next video.